the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam. Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
We've all talked and thought about NBA legends whose careers were way too short due to injury. The list is repetitive and thankfully hasn't added many new members since the inception of NBA YouTube. In this video though, I'll be examining just how long many of these players actually could have played had their careers not taken that tragic turn. For instance, many of our beloved stars today still have a chokehold on the game and are part of contending teams as their careers should be flirting with their natural ends, which is just one of many factors contributing to the great state the league is currently in. Then you have players that disappeared over a decade ago that could have retired relatively recently, meaning that their legendary careers would have overlapped with a ton of players and storylines that still affect our league today, which is also something we'll be discussing because I find that fascinating. In no particular order, let's tackle this list of 8 guys I wanted to examine. Also, before we start, just for clarity, I've been using the term legend. A lot of these guys were legends, but some of them were stars and just potential stars. Tracy McGrady, however, was a legend. His knee issues began around the 2006 season when he was merely 26 years young, unfortunately. Up to that point, in 5 years as an all-star, he'd been averaging nearly 27 points a game and was widely regarded as one of the league's top players. The fall came fast and hard though once the surgeries began, as it was fairly clear he would never be the same player by just 2009. Being forced to go on and bounce from team to team, he'd eventually reached the end of his journey in 2013 where he had one final and amazing chance at becoming an NBA champion. A very cruel ending to what was a very cruel career. To add insult, he was only 33 years old at the time. With an injury-free career and the heights that he'd reached, it's really not a stretch to say he could have been a very good player until he was around maybe 35, and probably could have called it quits a couple of years after that. So assuming more luck than he actually got, we could have seen Tracy McGrady play up until anywhere from around 2017 to 2019 if he absolutely pushed it. That may sound insane, except that the caveat for him is that his cousin, who was every bit as athletic, pushed it until he was 43. Consider that he came into the league later and older than T-Mac. Who knows if Vince sticking around would have pushed him to stay as long as possible had his legs have allowed. Now imagine that he was able to retain much of his stardom throughout his prime as well. That would have set up many more duels with Kobe and LeBron, which he'd already had many, as he could have remained a top-level player up until probably around 2013 or 14 before fully descending into his older age. He and Kobe's birthday were less than a year apart. Think about a world where T-Mac, Kobe, and D-Wade remained top shooting guards in the league in the early 2010s, jockeying for position on the ladder. The thought of him being able to play that long is fairly weird given the fact that nobody was even really paying attention to Steph Curry yet the last time he was in the league. Speaking of which, here's one that'll really trip you out, and this is what I mean when I'm not always talking about legends. Andrew Bynum. If you didn't know, which I really don't think you did, he is the same age as Steph. I take it that's not well known given the fact that 2K can't even locate him to get his rights for the game. However, yes, that means he's technically not even at retirement age as we currently speak. I'd say that's pretty insane to think about, given that he more or less disappeared 10 seasons ago. That's also insane to think about because by the time he did disappear, he'd already been in the league since 2006. Bynum came from an era where at one point, the top big man discussion in the league featured him, Dwight Howard, and Brook Lopez. That was the list. It was tough times for the center position, trust me. Still had a successful career despite having to call it quits at age 26 though. Multiple time champion, all-star in 2012, double-double average over the span of 5 seasons, and overall just a very solid big man when his legs allowed. Not to mention, he was contributing to winning basketball. Definitely had more than one all-star appearance and potentially healthy knees as well. In some world out there where they didn't disintegrate, he is at least at the age where he could be competing for a backup big spot somewhere in the year 2023, or playing overseas trying to get back, etc. Yet, given what his skill set was, I doubt he would have stuck around one way or the other. Let's get back to star shooting guards who had their careers painfully shortened. Brandon Roy was drafted for the 07 season. His last year of good health was 2010, and he was essentially done playing in the league by 2012 at the age of 28. He was completely screwed out of a very obvious superstar career, and unlike T-Mac, he didn't even get to reach his 30s or the journeyman arc, which means we really didn't see him compete much against any of our modern stars in their primes. Let's add another, I don't know, 8 years to his career. That gets him to 36, Hall of Fame career, even more all-star appearances than he'd already had, probably the head of multiple contending teams. Yeah, this is the one. Being very realistic, Roy could have just been retiring near 2020 or 2021. He's 39 years old right now. Regardless of the exact year, he would have relatively just left us. That'd have meant we saw him competing heavily against Curry, KD, hell, any star that you love. He also would have been one more top shooting guard in that conversation from earlier with the 2000 stars, whilst carrying over the torch with James Harden and company as the 2010s progressed. Roy's prime was supposed to run concurrently alongside them while they all competed for titles and accolades, but back in reality, we've been flip-flopping from year to year, having him in 2K as a part of the one historic team we know him for. Seriously, imagine him being just 31 or 32 years old in the West at the same time as the Warriors and Thunder were battling. Insane butterfly effect. Okay, back to the Rockets, who were definitely cursed during this era. Yao Ming was an all-star for every one of the 7 seasons that he played from 03 to 09. I feel like that isn't well known, especially considering rookies don't always make it. Posting a career average of nearly 20 and 10 with 2 blocks a game before his foot injury, it was pretty clear that all he was missing was health for himself and a healthy co-star. Sadly, once he went down against a Lakers team they certainly had a shot at beating in the first round, that was just about it for his chapter. Yao would never see the court again past the age of 30, officially joining the way too long list of what ifs. So, what if he'd had any kind of health allowing him to stick around? Simply lasting until 35 or 36 would have graced him with a respectful retirement in the 16 or 17 season. This may have given him the chance to compete through Dwight Howard's prime for supremacy of the position, and allowed him to stick around for the evolution of bigs that was taking place around the mid-2010s. Unlike Bynum, I believe Yao would have had some staying power given that he was extremely skilled for his size and likely would have fit right in with the shooting upgrades bigs began to boast. Instead, we only saw him for 5 games total in the 2010s before entering the history books forever. On that note, now that we've covered both he and McGrady, consider that they were practically the same age. While their careers in total likely could have landed them somewhere near 2017, their window to be a contending team could have hypothetically lasted until 2014, maybe even 15 if they were lucky. How weird is it that T-Mac and Yao's Rockets were out of fuel by 2008, 2009, when they could have existed and possibly competed with the Heatles or just kept competing with the Spurs that eventually kept contending. The Rockets did play the Lakers in 09. That was without Tracy McGrady already. I am absolutely hurt we did not get T-Mac and Yao versus Kobe and Gasol for that time that the Lakers were dominating the West. They were just flat out missing. In total, we at least missed an era between them. Keeping on the track of bigs, and circling back around to duo pieces, Greg Oden would literally still be here today in a perfect world, just the same as Kevin Durant. 26 years is beginning to feel like the cursed age, because that's also when Oden saw his last action during 2014, after enduring 3 straight seasons being sabotaged by his knees. It's fair to say he was doomed from the start, missing his entire rookie campaign, so that we never even got to see him scratch the surface of his potential. Had we have gotten that luxury, however, he would likely just now be wrapping things up at 35 years old. At a minimum, we'd still be hearing his name in basketball-related activities like Dwight Howard, who's actually 2 years older. This means in an alternate timeline, during the early or mid-2010s, Dwight, Yao, and Greg could have all been helping to avoid that little sliver of time where we consider the center position to be dead or dying. Plus, who knows what the evolution of bigs would have been like if they could have helped keep the traditional playstyle alive. And just like with the whole T-Mac and Yao situation, that was another duo that probably would have been competing and contending in the West. A 13-year career for Chris Bosh really doesn't even sound that bad, except for the fact that he was only 31 and still very much an all-star in 2016 when blood clots forced him into retirement out of nowhere. On the topic of how big men playstyles changed, he was quite literally part of that, gradually learning how to spread the floor even further than he already was in an attempt to make life easier for James and Wade. He'd won his championships, was on a streak of 11 straight all-star appearances, and then just had to pack it all up at a time when the Heat were trying to prove they could still contend minus LeBron. Add another 5 years, much like Brandon Roy, he'd have just been hanging it up maybe in the 2021 season. But with his playstyle, I'd argue Bosh could have given a team value even off the bench for a year or so longer, where he could have stretched it to 2022 if he so pleased. Sadly though, in the year 2021, we were getting his Hall of Fame enshrinement speech. I probably feel worse for him than anyone on the list. especially Gilbert Arenas. Today, most well known for his social media antics and the gun incident, it's easy to forget that his star era was over even before that. No Chill Gil was suffering all the way back in 2007 at the age of, once again, 26. The next few seasons were spent trying to get those glory days back. He was essentially washed by 2010, then completely out of the league by 2012 when he was just 30. Doing the thing again, adding some healthy and in his case drama-free years, we see that Gil could have reasonably stood to play until around 2017 or 18. That blows your mind to think about, because when he was good, he was really good. He might have been a premier point guard in the league still around the time that Curry broke out and started winning. He would have definitely had more legitimate battles with Chris Paul. Hell, he would have gone band for band with MVP Derrick Rose, as he was only 29 years old when that took place. The point guard position is regularly stacked, and it's a damn shame we didn't get to see his best at a time when his presence would have made that ladder even crazier. His injury early on changed a lot, and so did Kobe Bryant's. I went back and forth about whether I should have the Mamba on this list, given that he still played up until age 37, which is very reasonable expectancy for a star. Yet, I can't shake the feeling that his career was still shorter than it should have been. We all remember his Herculean efforts in the 2013 season that led to the torn Achilles when he was 34. Well, it's the simple fact that he was still at that level at that age. The Achilles caused a bit of a domino effect for the next season, then he suffered the shoulder injury after that. So if the Achilles never happens, it's fair to assume that maybe no major injury happens until the shoulder in 2015, where he likely would have still been a star player in our healthy scenario. Does that shoulder injury by itself debilitate him enough to where he believes he has nothing left to give by 2016? In conclusion, given his level of play at 34 years old, I could have seen him sustaining some level of star play until around 36 or 37. Probably not as excessive as the 2013 season, but to some degree where he'd still be considered a top player in the league. If his true drop-off didn't start until the 2016 season in this timeline, I'd assume he would have given it like another 2 years before he finally gave in, pushing his retirement date to 2018. Might not seem like much, the point though is that's at least 3 extra years of Kobe still being a relevant player in terms of winning, which he really never was again after the major injury. That's 3 more years where he's battling LeBron and other top stars in the league as opposed to being abruptly removed from those conversations. To end things here, mind you that this is all in a world where T-Mac, Brandon Roy, and Gilbert Arenas are all still functioning guards through the beginning and middle of the 2010s, presumably retiring in the late 2010s. We witnessed a lot of greatness, but were robbed of oh so much more.